This video is sponsored by G Fuel. Go to them for any of your energy drink needs. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Battle Frontier Series 10 Challenge presented by G Fuel. I am one of the casters that will be bringing you through all of the action today. My name is Nekra, and I'm joined by Justin Karras. I'm so excited to have you on the desk because, Justin, this is such a throwback for me to one of the first times I actually ever casted, and it was alongside you. So how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for having me on. Really excited to be casting this event with you. New format, new possibilities. Extremely new and unique is that we're not going to be having Dynamax for once. So
Yeah. It's kind of interesting because especially the game as we know it, especially with Sword and Shield, Dynamax has been an incredibly important factor in every single game that we've played. And so with the Series 10 rule set, Dynamax is no longer a thing. And so I feel like that just kind of brings itself into a whole new world of possibilities for a lot of these players.
yeah, it was definitely something that I didn't ever really expect to happen for them to remove a key mechanic that they added for a format entirely. It's like if Megas just disappeared for
Mhm.
like a section of one of the formats back in like 2014 or 2015. In all honesty, I wish we had the chance to maybe experience what that would be like just to see how the power creep would change. But with Dynamax specifically, I feel like there's so much different that happens, and we really haven't experimented ourselves until recently without Dynamax. So there's so many things that are going to be different. The variables just interact so differently. The dimension of Pokemon, in my opinion, changes from like a three-dimensional game now back to like the two-dimensional game we were used to, where you don't have to worry about that extra layer of either offense or defense. Um, so yeah, I'm super excited to see how this plays out.
Yeah, I'm really excited as well. And, I think you brought up such a good point about the power creep specifically with a no Dynamax format. There were a lot of grassroots tours. I think a lot of people remember like the Eevee series that I just ran, I think, a couple weeks ago. And just like with that, I feel like we didn't have restricteds. We didn't have restricteds. And so, what do you think about adding in a single restricted into the format that you're allowed to play around? Does it change the dynamic at all of what a no Dynamax series can really look like?
Yeah, it's weird. I feel like they're trying to actually find a balance in power. Removing one of the restricteds kind of makes it so that you can build around one core idea instead of the combination of the two restricteds. I think in some ways that might have the opposite effect where things get more centralized, especially without Dynamax, because there's less ability to combat the extremely powerful Pokemon. Like you're kind of just raw base statting it up. The really bulky stuff is going to have an advantage. Bulky, strong, fast, and the more niche things where it's like maybe their stat distribution is a little bit lower and they're like special defense stuff like Cartana.
Mhm.
A good Pokemon that like sometimes can be mitigated because it's so offensive and fast. It might not have the damage to actually just take down these things that are so bulky. I think that one restricted in general is it's weird because the combination element you're losing, you can't really cover your one restricted's weakness with another restricted's damage output. And not a lot of the Pokemon that aren't like a pseudo legendary can keep up with their stats overall. Like they're all, plus 600 base stat, which is
Mhm.
really, really makes a difference, especially at like level 50. Um, I think that unique items are going to be very important. Like the item choices that players make, it's going to be less about like get a weakness policy set up going, and just take off from there. I kind of miss the fact that we won't be able to have like the staple core restricteds that I'm used to, but I'm a little bit old school in that regard. Coming from 2016, and I actually skipped out on 2019 because I wasn't really a big fan of Z moves, but I probably would have played and had I not been on a break at that time.
Yeah, there's been so many different dynamics in the game, especially when you take a look at a VGC history as a whole. But the fact that we got a little bit of a taste of what a single restricted would look like, and we've had a ton of grassroots tours that have experimented with the idea of no Dynamax, it makes me really excited about what's going to happen with Series 10. And I am so, so excited that we get a chance to be one of the first tournaments to really get a view and get a perspective of what Series 10 is going to look like. Just for a little bit of background information for those of you that are just tuning in, Battle Frontier is an organization that Joe, UX9, and I both founded in hopes of being able to bring a ton of tournaments to the VGC community as a whole. Just a small way to be able to give back to everybody. And we're so lucky to be able to have a sponsor for this very first event, G Fuel. I got my G Fuel ready to go. I'm super excited. It's getting me pumped for the games ahead. But I just gotta say just a huge thank you to our sponsor G Fuel for giving us the prize money to be able to afford to be able to give back to all of these players. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about what's happened yesterday. This is a 2-day tournament, which means that we had Swiss rounds yesterday and we had a top cut today that we're going to be bringing you the action for. But Justin, I feel like we had a ton of action yesterday with just Swiss rounds alone.
Yeah, 338 players, eventually getting to a top cut of 30. We have tons of different regions. We have around 8 US players, 8 Italians, 8 from Spain, or 7 from Spain, and a couple of other regions littered throughout there, France, Great Britain, Brazil. So it's awesome to see great international representation. Pokemon has always been a very global community. And that's kind of the missing element we have right now is, we're not in offline events. We have online. We're trying to bring that stuff together, the world's element where you all get to meet up with your friends and the people that come from different cultures. That's always the best part of it. Everybody brings a different unique take to the game, even within your own regions. I mean, I would meet up from
Yeah.
people in America that come from the opposite coast that just have completely different personalities and different approaches, and you learn so much. So I feel like a little bit of the social element isn't here, but we're doing our best, and it's great that players have that type of opportunity. I think a big thing, especially too, is there's players that are even aging up in their divisions. During what I call the time skip era, kind of like in One Piece, where everything had there was a
Yes.
2-year time skip, like an anime arc. You have seniors they went from like 13-year-olds to like 15-year-olds, and now they're playing with adults at times. So it's funny because in some cases we've always known that these seniors could probably take out a lot of the adults that they would be playing against in tournament, especially some protege juniors that we all know and love following their success for. I'm sure we can think of a couple names that pop into mind. It's awesome that we get to see that. In fact, we're actually going to get a matchup like that, or maybe a couple of them today.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, let's go ahead and talk about that matchup. Let's not wait any longer to get into the very first match of the day. We've got Ink versus Ashton that we are going to be bringing to you live for our top 32 round of 32. I don't even know what to call it, but essentially the first matchup of the day. So let's go ahead and pull up the accomplishments for Ink because you just mentioned it, Justin. We're going to get a matchup here that is going to be incredible, where Ink is one of the players that is aging up out of the senior division into the masters division. And I feel like they have had a ton of accomplishments to their name just as a masters player alone. Top 16 in Victory Road, that is a huge accomplishment. And also the spring qualifier as well. And what an interesting team to look at, too.
yeah, this is one of the things where if Dynamax is gone, some of the more frail Pokemon are going to be back. So because they don't have to really worry about everything, popping a weakness policy, going for the Dynamax, and more defensive tools are added in. There was a lot of moves that Dynamax actually kind of invalidated, stuff like Roar for positioning, weight-based moves, and even like simple stuff like Substitute or Fake Out were key tools that we were used to having in 2017, 2016, 2018 that were kind of just they weren't as useful because it was pretty much let the Dynamax rip or stall out the Dynamax and go. And I know that some people are very averse to that style of play. Some people favored it, but usually in earlier formats when we're new to these tools, we get a lot of hyper aggression at the start. I feel like because a lot of the players that are going to be in this cut are very experienced, or just they know their way around building. We're going to see more balance than usual, especially with one restricted as opposed to two, because you have that one kind of extremely powerful Pokemon that you're going to try and set up for. So there's going to be a lot of positional stuff, a lot of fake out, and Rillaboom and Incineroar is kind of the staple that we're going to end up seeing in this format develop for, fake out, U-turn out. Both Pokemon have excellent pivoting ability and both bring something to the table with, grassy terrain and Intimidate, as defensive tools.
Yeah, I mean, just taking a look at this team, I think it's really interesting that Ink decided to go for the Groudon as their one restricted Pokemon. And then speaking of like the frailer Pokemon on the team, you've got Nihiligo. You also have Regieleki, which we like to talk about having paper defenses. And it's really cool to be able to see a lot of these Pokemon start working in tandem with each other. You've got the Drifblim that has a Grassy Seed. I forgot to mention that Top Cut is open team sheet. So every single player that's playing against each other has all of this information, and we're super excited to be able to share it with you. But let's go ahead and talk about Ashton really quickly. This is a player that needs absolutely no introduction. I feel like 2 times international champion absolutely says it all. But really, what really sticks out to me is that you still have Urshifu and you also have Zacian. Zacian, one of those Pokemon that was supposed to be a huge threat against Dynamax.
Yeah, it's actually on like, the ability for it to do extra damage against Dynamax was big, but it's still amazing without Dynamax too, because it just has amazing typing. I mean, it's basically a Mega Mawile but faster and a extremely busted ability. Ashton not even having all of his accomplishments up there. That was
Yeah.
definitely the most humble brag ever. 2-time international champion. This is a multiple regional champion, top 16, top 32 at Worlds. Incredible player. One of America's best. So this is definitely a spot where Ink can, make their claim in the Masters division. One thing I'm seeing on the screen right now is that there's an Urshifu, and one thing I
Yes.
wanted to bring up is that because the lack of Dynamax has kind of removed a little bit of the bulk in the format, there is kind of this power creep that happened under our noses, where we didn't realize that things were getting a much stronger, much bulkier. Rillaboom and Urshifu and Regieleki are, if they were introduced in any other generation, they would be like top 3 in usage.
Yeah.
They're so strong. They have amazing abilities. They all bring something unique to the table. Urshifu can hit to protect, which is incredibly. I don't know how to explain it. It's I should say that I'm indifferent to it, but I think frustrating. But Regieleki has a speed stat that we've really never seen in competitive before. It's crazy strong too, and an ability that boosts, basically has like a choice specs at all time when choosing electric attacks. So I feel like the way that these teams play out is, again, it's the defensive element to it is kind of centered around their Rillaboom and Incineroar, but I feel like Zacian may be a bad matchup for, or other way around. Sorry, Groudon might be a bad matchup for Zacian.
Yeah, I think that this is a particularly interesting matchup, just given the different Pokemon that exist on both sides. And I think that the fact that we are seeing a Zacian, we are seeing the Urshifu, it definitely lends itself really well to being able to pump out some huge damage, especially when you take a look at the actual move set that's on that Zacian. Substitute, a lot of moves that have to deal with the weight of a specific Pokemon, those are all going to be coming back. And so if you think about the fact that Zacian on Ashton's side of the field is substitute, you can basically cycle through substitute, protect, make sure that Zacian is really safe. And in this particular format, you're basically waiting for an opportunity to go for something like that Sacred Sword. But let's go ahead and jump right into the game here. We've got Siddharth versus Ashton. And we're already seeing that Drifblim hit the field alongside that Incineroar. Double Intimidate on the field right now.
Yeah, Drifblim and Regieleki, without the Grassy Seed procking and relieving the Unburden, there's no way for the Drifblim to outspeed the Regieleki. Although the speed changes in the mechanic change in Gen 8 would allow the Drifblim to outspeed, get something like a Tailwind off. We know that Drifblim actually has the threat of Hypnosis, so that's definitely something that they're going to be worried about. But we're going to see a switch right here.
Yeah, looks like that Drifblim doesn't feel safe in front of the pressure of the Landorus and the Regieleki. So we are going to see Ink get a chance to switch in that Groudon, which is going to also change the weather on the field. Regieleki on Ashton's side of the field, just going for a Protect here as Landorus goes for the Rock Tomb right into the Groudon. But we all know that's not going to be super effective, and that's going to make sure that, it's going to stay healthy. That Groudon's going to stay really healthy.
Yeah, not much damage coming out here on the field. And Sonora is actually just going to get right out of there, drop the stats of the Landorus. I feel like that turn worked out a lot better for Ink because they were able to pivot. The threat of Hypnosis and the switching into Rillaboom to proc that Grassy Seed was huge. That's why you probably saw the Regieleki protect. There's no way to really prevent that Hypnosis from being fired off. So having to respect that is huge. Definitely great awareness from Ashton, knowing that sometimes, even a 55% chance is terrifying. Rillaboom, though, coming back out onto the field, which going to match up pretty nicely into Landorus.
Yeah, especially setting the grassy terrain, you can go for something like a grassy glide, which is going to be really, really nice to be able to go into that Landorus. But the other thing too is, that Rock Tomb actually dropped Groudon speed, so I wonder how that's going to play a particular role here. I don't think that you feel too threatened by what's on the field if you're Ink at the moment, especially because that Regieleki can't really do damage. Oh, but Ashton's going to try to go for the double protect here, not going to be able to get it, but also going to be protecting that Landorus. So U-turn, going to come out here. Landorus, of course, not going to be able to make sure that that goes off, but the Precipice Blades here from the Groudon. Let's see if it's going to be able to hit that Regieleki, and it is absolutely going to. Without that double protect here, will bring it right down to its Focus Sash.
I really like the play of going for the double protect. I know it might seem odd at first, but Ashton probably doesn't have the defensive switch into Groudon with Heat Crash being able to threaten the Rillaboom and maybe if Incineroar is in the back. I feel like that might have revealed a little bit of information, though, that you might be worried that the Rillaboom kind of being in the back there was revealed. But at the same time, again, the damage was great. We are going to see that Landorus get the protect off, wanting to, preserve the damage, going to be a key pivot there. One thing that's kind of weird, the way that Dynamax is playing into this format not being there is there's no threat of the Landorus just going for a Dynamax and then just dealing out crazy damage. So players kind of getting their chops again for just defensively switching.
Yeah, pivots are going to be so important here, which is why we see a lot of moves like U-turn, Volt Switch, Parting Shot on a lot of these Pokemon, because it makes it much easier for you to maneuver around, change the board position up, and you can even see from there, Ink was going to go for a pivot move as well, bringing back in the Drifblim, but this time the grassy terrain is set, so that grassy seed is definitely going to be popped here, and it's going to raise its defense as well.
Okay, U-turn going to be going off of the Drifblim. Once again, Ink just completely maintaining their position so well. There's definitely a threat of Tailwind coming out now. There's nothing that Ashton's going to be able to really do to stop it. And just looking at the Pokemon on Ashton's side, there's not too much that they have that can really threaten the Groudon with a knockout. I know that Rillaboom can do a hefty chunk, but Groudon has pretty great defensive stats. So I was talking about when I mentioned that, these restricteds have really high just base stats in general, so they might be able to survive. But we are going to see that Groudon get a knockout on Regieleki. So one of the pieces on Ashton's board is gone.
Yeah, especially one that could have threatened that Drifblim. But with the Unburden and the Grassy Siege, you have to really be aware of the fact that that Drifblim's going to be going super, super fast. But what Ashton really has here is, I think he still has a lot of options that Zacian hasn't hit the field yet. So you could kind of consider that, if you're able to hold on to your restricted just a little bit longer, that might end up doing you a lot of favors in the long run. But that Landorus from Ashton does come back out onto the field and is going to get an Intimidate drop onto both of these Pokemon on Ink's side of the field.
Yeah, it's funny. I wonder if Ashton's worried that they maybe just didn't play a little more aggressively in the start around the Hypnosis. Just ignore that it's going to be a thing. Again, Regieleki doesn't have too much offensive pressure against Groudon, so it's tough for that to be the bring. But Groudon going to be switching out here. We're going to be seeing the Rillaboom coming back out again, just bringing the grassy terrain and fake out pressure. Will-O-Wisp going into the Rillaboom, that's going to be a huge boon to Ashton there. They're going to have no real offensive pressure against Groudon.
Yeah, that is going to be super, super tough. I think that Will-O-Wisp is just so crucial, especially when you consider how well Ink has been pivoting around their Pokemon. You can't just really safely bring in the Zacian anymore, because you should be worried about that Will-O-Wisp here. But Zacian does end up hitting the field here, will be able to get that attack boost from the Intrepid Sword ability, and we will see also Landorus going for that Rock Tomb right into the Drifblim. Not having to worry about a weakness policy is really nice, but you can also drop its speed as well with the Rock Tomb.
Yeah, unfortunately, though, now for Ashton, Ink has the Rillaboom with fake out pressure on the field, Tailwind as a threat, and even though Rock Tomb went into the Drifblim, I'm still pretty sure that it outspeeds everything on the field and threatens pretty much anything there too with a Will-O-Wisp. So Ink just kind of playing this positionally super well, something that we kind of maybe not have had the chance to experience with it, Dynamax being so aggressive. So it's awesome to see just even in the first game that this is a theme going on in this tournament.
Yeah, a lot more defensive switches and pivots, I feel like, are going to have to happen when you're in a non-Dynamax format. You can't just click the shiny red button anymore and expect that all of your offense is going to be able to work. But we're seeing that, this is a pretty tricky situation that Ashton is going to have to navigate here. I still don't think it's over just yet, but as you mentioned, that fake out from the Rillaboom going to be able to stop Zacian in its tracks.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like I forgot what this looked like. It's so fast paced. We were so I feel like I forgot what the revolving door Pokemon felt like. Rock Tomb going to come out there from Landorus. Actually gets a critical hit, going to break through that Grassy Seed. Huge critical hit coming out there. There's no more Will-O-Wisp pressure, but also giving a free switch to that Groudon that's going to be coming in on the first turn of Tailwind, which is a little bit unfortunate for Ashton. So they maybe didn't even want to get a critical hit there.
Yeah, I think that critical hit might have been a bit of an unfortunate misstep for Ashton. Obviously, you can't control whether or not you crit, but yes, this Groudon's going to be able to move in right into that Driftblin's place, changing the weather. And this was just really excellently pivoted by Ink, I feel like, to be able to make sure that it got timed perfectly that the weather can be reset for this Groudon.
Well, you say that Pokemon players can't control whether the Pokemon crit. I feel like Paul Chua would disagree with that. However, in this position, again, Ink, possibly going to be taking the first game in this set. I feel like Groudon is just a runaway train here. Zacian most likely going to want to go for a protect. Landorus, you might need to preserve and send out to the back. There's also a chance that Ashton ends up staying in here and trying to get a decent chunk of damage off into the Groudon. If Ashton can stall out the Tailwind, then they might be able to do significant damage to the Groudon. But I don't know if they have enough firepower to knock it out in one shot.
Yeah, well, we have the U-turn coming through, which means that we get a chance to see another Pokemon come out through that revolving door, and it is going to be an Incineroar once again, and I think this is really critical because you get to just drop the attack of both of these physical attackers on the field from Ashton, and that means that you're doing significantly less damage to the Groudon. He Crash comes out, though. Oh, it's going to go right into the Landorus. That's going to do a significant chunk of damage, but that Rocky Helmet from the Landorus also going to do a little bit of chip back.
So I believe the way that works is the Heat Crash is based off the difference in the weight of the Pokemon. I haven't seen that move yet because I only played with Dynamax, but I'm pretty sure that's why it's doing significant damage. And it is a physical type move. So Lander is going to take a hefty chunk of damage. Great call there from Ink. Once again, proving that they really are prepared to, show what they're made of in the Masters Division. And the Rillaboom is going to be coming back out onto the field, going to once again reignite the Grassy Surge. Now there is fake out pressure to stall out one more of turn of the Tailwind that is out on Ink's side. Zacian, I don't know if it has the ability to get a attack off into this Incineroar, but a play that we might end up seeing is a fake out into the Incineroar. And I know that Ashton carries Substitute, and a Substitute could be momentum saving.
Yeah, it kind of goes back to what we were saying before in Team Preview, that you can cycle through the Substitute, the Protect, and just kind of bide out the time in order to make sure that the Tailwind expires, and then Zacian is able to get off some pretty big damage into this Groudon. I think that's really the biggest threat that's on the field right now. Obviously, that Incineroar is also very scary, just given the Steel typing on Zacian. But you do have to kind of consider that, if you're Ashton, you can only fake out one Pokemon, so what is it going to be? It's not even a fake out here. We're going to see a switch. Lander is coming back in to be able to use the Intimidate ability once again onto both of Ink's Pokemon, and we'll have to wait and see how the rest of this turn plays out.
Very dangerous for the Zacian just to be, completely vulnerable here. The fake out going to be coming out into the Landorus slot. The Intimidate going to be dropping the attacks of both of these Pokemon. Groudon going for a Substitute. Is Zacian going to be able to break that Substitute after the Intimidate? I know that it did get a attack boost. Behemoth Blade going to be dropping right down into that Groudon Substitute. Should be enough to break it. If not, then I feel bad for that dog.
Yeah. All right. There you go. Dog wins in this situation. We'll be able to break that Substitute from the Groudon. But you still have enough health to be able to go for a Substitute again. But I think that was really smart on Ink's part, because you kind of could predict in some situation that Groudon was going to be pressured down by either of those Pokemon. And if you're able to get the Substitute off, then you're mitigating a ton of incoming damage. But let's go ahead and see what's going to happen next here, because I still think this is a very interesting position for both of these players to be in, knowing that they still have the ability to pivot a little bit with U-turn as well as parting shot. So you kind of have to consider also, you could also make just some hard switches and get those reads.
Yeah, it's weird. I feel like if Landorus either stays in or switches, it's kind of a fodder like slot, not just the Pokemon. You're kind of deciding which of them is going to go down here. The big deal is that Zacian is going to try to avoid taking too much damage so that it can, kind of close this out. I think it needs a little bit of extra health to take on that Incineroar 1v1 if it is the last thing left against it. We are going to see the Behemoth Blade once again go into the Groudon. Ashton immaculately calling out these Groudon substitutes. I feel like Ink had amazing positioning, and now this is their last turn of Tailwind. So, and their Pokemon are running out of health, and Zacian has the speed advantage. So even though the Flare Blitz is going to be taking out that Incineroar, Rillaboom's going to come in with Fake Out pressure, and that means that the Zacian might be able to get off a substitute himself.
Yeah, that is something that's super, super scary for Ink's particular position is that Ashton really played for this end game, which was that, maybe we can stall out the tailwind, which is something that Ashton was able to do very, very well, despite the fact that Behemoth Blade wasn't able to secure the knockout onto the Groudon. This is still a ton of pressure on Ashton's side of the field, especially knowing now that Rillaboom is back in here and should be able to go for some, really nasty attacks or just have that fake out.
Yeah, I think that the Fake Out into the Incineroar is a smart play. The Groudon, honestly, I think the onus is on Ink to not protect the Groudon or not be scared of the Grassy Glide and just go right for the substitute or go right for like a Precipice Blades to try and get as much damage as you can to the Zacian. The Zacian is Ashton's only hope for really pulling this game out. So I really like to see Ink get a little bit more aggressive. It feels like they went a little bit too hard on the substitute. That was definitely just like if that substitute got off, it was probably game. So I understand definitely going for it. But here this whole turn just decides the rest of this game.
Wow, no substitute either. It's going to be the Grassy Glide. It's super effective, but it's not going to be able to do enough to be able to deal with the Groudon. Sacred Sword comes out, though. Should be able to pick up the knockout onto the Incineroar, but I think it actually hung on there. So double Precipice Blades being able to come out here, and that is a ton of damage onto that Zacian.
That Incineroar surviving is huge because it might be able to knock out the Zacian. We see the Flare Blitz coming out. Is it going to go into it? Yes, it will, and that's actually most likely going to be game. I don't know that the Rillaboom has what it takes to do this with the other Rillaboom on Ink's side not being burned. I think that was a great play from Sid. I don't know that if the Sacred Sword was a roll, that Incineroar definitely survived with like 1 HP. It was the Soul Spirit Focus Sash. If you love your trainer, live with 1 HP. Hang on. I got this for you, buddy. Good job.
Yeah, oh my gosh. Yeah, it comes down to the Rillaboom versus Rillaboom matchup, but you're absolutely right that Ashton's Rillaboom is in a much less better position. I think that one of the reasons why Groudon was able to hang on was because of the burn. Even though Grassy Glide is super effective into that Groudon, you do have that burn, which is going to half the damage that is incoming. So that was actually a huge, huge turn for Ink to be able to sway this game back in their favor after it really felt like Ashton Zacian was going to be able to clutch it out.
Yeah, and I feel like now Ashton's probably thinking about how they're going to make adjustments going into game 2. I don't really think that they played wrong per se. I think that the Regieleki might have been a little bit underwhelming. So I wonder if that's the slot that ends up being switched out for game 2. But Rillaboom just going to be U-turning off of each other, going for those bug moves, doing a sizable amount of damage. I'm actually pretty sure that the U-turn will knock out this Rillaboom this turn. So Ink will be closing out game 1. Well played there from the rising senior, time skip master, whatever you want to call it. Amazing player that I'm excited to see develop. Taking a game off of Ashton, that's definitely nothing to scoff at. So going into game 2, do you think that there are any adjustments that you could see coming out?
Yeah, I think I agree with you for Ashton that maybe the Regieleki here, it just felt more underwhelming because it was never in a great position to be able to get off the damage necessary into that Drifblim. I think that Drifblim was also used as an incredibly good defensive tool from Ink to be able to make sure that Pokemon weren't taking too much damage. The Grassy Seed as well was just such an integral part of making sure that there was this big wall of defense that Ink was able to set up. But the other thing here, I think, is, maybe not waiting too long to be able to get that Zacian in. I think that Drifblim setting up Tailwind was definitely something that played into Ink's favor just a little bit more. But it looks like we're going to not see too many changes here. I think Ashton feels very, very confident in the game plan that they had originally set out to play game number 1 with. It just didn't seem to entirely go their way, especially knowing that Ink was more willing to go for something like a Will-O-Wisp, something a little bit more riskier like that.
Yeah, again, Regieleki still does considerable damage to stuff like Incineroar and especially to Drifblim. And it just has a speed advantage. If you can keep it down as one of your last pieces, it can knock 40%
Mhm.
off of the Incineroar in the end game, which seems to be what Ashton was playing for. Literally, barely just missing closing that game out because of the Incineroar with hanging on 1 HP. Going into game 2, we will see a Drifblim Incineroar lead. I think the same leads as game 1, except the Rillaboom is being switched out for Ashton here. Regieleki going to be so the grassy terrain is going to be proccing that grassy seed, the Unburden firing off, and Intimidate going to knock the attack down of the Rillaboom.
Yeah, I think that's actually really huge, and especially for Ink being able to get that grassy seed off onto the Drifblim, that's something that you definitely want to be able to have happen. That means the Tailwinds are going to be coming out faster. So are those Will-O-Wisps, and you're not going to be taking nearly as much damage because you did have that Intimidate pressure coming out from Ink's side of the field. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what Ink decides to go for here. Obviously, we could see what Ashton was locking into, but I love the fake out from the Rillaboom to be able to go into that Incineroar. But Hypnosis! Oh my god, it's going to hit!
Yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about in the last game. I was like, I wonder if Ashton was worried about being too passive around the Hypnosis because it's kind of a 50-50, but good players hit their moves. So we will see that from incoming out. That's going to be a huge game, turn 1 for this game 2. And the momentum is already in their favor. So this could get scary really quickly.
Yeah, wow, getting the Hypnosis is absolutely huge. Now that Regieleki can't do anything, and that's one of the wonderful things about seeing that Grassy Seed Unburden combination on that Drifblim is that you're just that much faster. Regielecki's one of the fastest Pokemon in the game. And that is so scary to have to deal with something that is even just speed creeping that. But we are going to get a chance to see, hopefully Regieleki getting that turn 1 wake up. I think that would be really excellent to see, but Ink is going to be able to get that Tailwind off.
Yeah, turn 1 wake up would be clutch here. Regieleki gonna be snoozing just for another turn. This could be a lot of sizable damage off into either of these Pokemon, but Siddharth actually gonna opt for the parting shot. After Tailwind, Incineroar outspeeding the Rillaboom, important to note. That's something that's usually to be expected. Rillaboom's not terribly fast, but still a decent sizable speed stat. So going to be going into their own Rillaboom. Ain't going to have pretty much, as much offensive pressure as they want with an unintimidated Rillaboom on the field, but also ended up acting as a perfect switch into that Woodhammer. So almost completely, negligent damage being done there from Ashton.
Yeah, especially with that Regieleki still being asleep, Drifblim is super safe to maybe go for a Will-O-Wisp here. As we were able to get a chance to see, and that really helped out with the Rillaboom 1v1. Regieleki is going to stay asleep. This is not good for Ashton right now, especially because that Grassy Glide is going to bring it down to 17 HP. But a Shadow Ball this time around coming out from the Drifblim is going to do enough to be able to pick up that Regieleki, and that's a ton of offensive pressure off the board for Ashton.
Yeah, once again, that Regieleki being rendered almost completely useless. The U-turn going to be going off into that Rillaboom. Understandably, that 50% chance for the Hypnosis to hit. I completely understand the risk of, just saying, all right, if it whiffs, and I'll have the momentum. It could have been huge. When you think about it, Ink could have possibly lost their Drifblim and then all of their speed control. So, again, the stats are there in their favor, 55-45, but Landorus going to be coming in here and going to be dropping that Intimidate down. Or maybe it's 60%. I think Hypnosis is either 55 or 60. I am old and I'm forgetting things nowadays. So anyway, Zacian going to be coming in here for Ashton with the assist from the Landorus and kind of decent, positional pressure on the field. The Drifblim is scary, but, there's still 2 threats that it has to... It can't target both of these Pokemon with a Will-O-Wisp. And if Aaron Zhang is in the chat, then hopefully they can channel some of their 2013 World's energy, and maybe Ashton is going to get off an attack without getting burned. No Will-O-Wisp connects. That might be great. Unfortunately, I don't know that that's something that you can play around in this type of position with your tournament on the line.
Yeah, this is a single elimination top cut. So whoever is able to win here is going to be able to advance in the bracket. Loser has to go home, and Ink is already up 1-0 in this series. Gonna go ahead and switch out the Rillaboom here in favor of that Incineroar, and this is a pivot that we got a chance to see before. Ink doing a fantastic job in game number 1 to be able to hold on that pressure, and that Will-O-Wisp is gonna hit the Zacian! Oh my goodness.
Yeah, now this is definitely back against the wall status. Zacian does end up getting a substitute off, but that was their main damage dealer on the field and in the bring four even. So Ashton gonna get off a rock tomb. But as you can see, once again, that grassy seed coming into play, barely even doing 25% after the grassy seed and the intimidate from the Incineroar. Ink has a ton of offensive pressure, is in great position, and Zacian is burned and not as threatening as it needs to be to start clutching this game out.
Yeah, I think this is a really smart play by Ashton, though, recognizing that that Drift Blim is putting on a ton of pressure on Ink's side of the field. You have to target it down. You have to get it off the field because otherwise your entire team is going to be burned. And especially when you're taking a look at Landorus, Zacian, Rillaboom that are left for Ashton or those Hypnoses. Oh, man, that was a huge dodge for Ashton.
Yeah, finally these status moves not connecting. Zacian gonna get the Behemoth Blade off. It's gonna go into the Drift Limb. Do the Grassy Seed and the -1 and the Will-O-Wisp, it still does a crazy amount of damage, and that's because it's a critical hit. I was like, wow, this thing is really strong. Flare Blitz gonna go off too, gonna break the substitute of that Zacian. Now we are in just very scary territory still. I think that, Ink has played pretty masterfully, no pun intended. Lander is going to be going off that Rock Tomb, not going to get the damage that's needed to get the knockout. But once again, I think that actually kind of works in their favor because Drift Blim isn't as scary as, say, a Groudon coming in Tailwind.
Yeah, this does bide Ashton a lot of time to be able to make sure that that Tailwind does expire. But there it is. That's the Tailwind over. That's also the grassy terrain over for the time being. Not before those Pokemon do get a chance to heal up a little bit of their HP. But this is super interesting because I just feel like in this position, Ink can still go for a status move here, or even just like a Shadow Ball. That Drifblim is just doing so much work for this particular team.
Yeah, automatically just kind of cementing itself as a very strong Pokemon, kind of harkening back to Lele Blimp in 2017. Once again, I am old. I must remind everyone. We're going to get the attack going out into the Drifblim. Going to get the knockout. Wait a minute. How did they went for the tailwind? I think I must have missed that. The U-turn going to go off into the Incineroar. But once again, Ashton going to have to kind of stall through this tailwind.
Well, what's really good about the way that Ashton played that is the Rock Tomb did get 2 speed drops onto that Drifblim, and the Tailwind had expired. So that does leave Zacian as one of the fastest Pokemon on the field. And
Oh,
that is going to be able to secure the knockout for Ashton. So that threat of that Drifblim being able to get the Will-O-Wisp onto the Rillaboom is going to be huge, but Zacian is also going to be knocked out here by that Flare Blitz coming in from Ink's Incineroar.
yeah, the critical hit I don't think mattered there. Thank you for keeping track of the Rock Tomb boost. I completely missed that. That's going to be huge for the ending stretch here. I think it's probably going to come down to the Rillaboom on Ashton's side being the main damage dealer. But there's kind of not going to be any pivot chances. We're going to get one Intimidate coming down from the Landorus, and there's still room for Ink to go for pivots. So I still think that the momentum is in their favor. They're going to be able to set up that Groudon, possibly get a substitute off. Especially if the Landorus outspeeds the Groudon, because they'll end up taking the damage first and then be able to go for the Earthquake. But the first thing that Siddharth's going to do is they're going to get the Rillaboom in, get some fake out pressure so that they can probably pivot that Incineroar out and then get their Groudon in safely. I think that in the ending game, the win condition here for Ashton is to keep your Rillaboom alive and maybe get some very strong attacks off. You need it for the Groudon, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is really smart for the Rillaboom to go for a fake out into the Incineroar, knowing that that is the thing that threatens that Rillaboom the most. But we are going to see a U-turn coming out from Ink's Rillaboom, which is going to do quite a bit of damage to the Rillaboom on Ashton's side of the field. One of the final pivots, I think, coming out here. And it is going to be that Groudon going to be able to come in pretty scot-free, knowing that that Landorus did target down the Incineroar.
If Ashton doesn't get the knockout on the Incineroar, that means that they're probably going to be able to get a Rillaboom switch in and then drop another Intimidate down, which could be huge, especially for the end game. So we end up seeing the attack not take the KO there, which is really unfortunate for Ashton. But once again, great for Ink. Definitely going to be huge for possibly getting this substitute off the Groudon, or just even for dishing out tons of damage.
Yeah, wow, that survival is absolutely huge for Ink because you're absolutely right. They can just switch out the Incineroar, get the Rillaboom back in. It's kind of okay at this point if the Rillaboom goes down in this scenario. and then just get the Intimidate back in, cycle through those. Ink has done a fantastic job in game number 1 and game number 2 of keeping that Incineroar alive and healthy to be able to pivot in and make sure those Intimidates hit their mark onto these physical attackers on Ashton's side of the field. But Ashton desperately needs a knockout here. That is something that has to happen, but of course, Ink is going to be switching out that Incineroar and be able to get that Rillaboom right back in.
Yeah, the extra intimidate could be huge. And man, I wish I had people in my life as committed to me as that Incineroar is to Ink, because the survivability on that thing has been incredible. Groudon going to go for Protect there. Lander is going to get an Earth Power off. That's actually a very key reveal that it's going to be able to go for a special based move. Possibly going to be able to get the knockout on that Incineroar and not have to really care about the Intimidates. That might be, crucial damage coming down the line. But now there is a Rillaboom on Ink's side of the field with Fake Out pressure. And pretty much full HP. So
Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and fake out the Rillaboom, which is definitely the biggest threat on the field to that Groudon. But Groudon is going to be able to go for that Heat Crash right into that Rillaboom. It's going to deal super effective damage, and that is a huge knockout for Ink. That leaves Ashton with just the Landorus left to have to deal with the revolving door of Pokemon that Ink still has available. But the Earth Power does come out here. It's not going to be nearly enough to be able to get that Groudon to even half health.
yeah, and unfortunately, I think for Ashton, there's no Rock Slide and Prey option that many of us VGC players are used to. I think that Ink kind of dealt the penultimate blow there into that Rillaboom, as we are going to see the forfeit coming out from Ashton. What an excellent first round set. And Ink, thank you for an amazing display of skill. And once again, we joke around about the revolving door of Pokemon because of how much you see switching and U-turn and
Mhm.
pivoting. But man, honestly, I feel like I'm reuniting with an old friend. I haven't seen them in so long. All of these switches and pivots, it's incredible. I'm a big fan of Dynamax. I may be one of the biggest fans of Dynamax, but maybe I'm being won
Hot
over
take, hot
by
take.
this defensive just the switch heavy play. I missed it. And it felt like even more fast paced than I'm used to for like 2020 or 2021 formats. I feel like maybe with turns being so consequential when you have so much damage output on the field, when things are like less bulky and have more variability in what they can go for, and you have better pivots, there's going to be a much faster pace to it. There's going to be, fake outs and U-turns and intimidate drops because, a lot of the calcs you already know. You don't have to think which of these
Mhm.
slots is going to Dynamax. Do I have to Dynamax here? Do I have to maybe go for some type of defensive maneuvering? Am I trying to stall out these 3 turns? And now I'm maybe starting to understand why, the rule set has relegated Dynamax out.
Yeah, I think that was something that a lot of players were kind of hoping to be able to play around with a little bit more, and it's really nice to see that we are gonna get a chance to be able to do that. But that was such an exciting first set. Uh, Justin, you speak a lot to one of the reasons why I really wanted to have you on this particular broadcast because of your love of defensive switches and defensive play, and so hopefully you are enjoying this just as much as I am.
So
But
much.
yeah, it's been a fun time so far, but we still have more to show you guys. Thank you so much again to our sponsor getting a chance to sponsor our prize pool and sponsor the Battle Frontier Series 10 challenge. Thanks so much for tuning in. We are going to be right back after this short break with a round number 16 match coming up on your screens after this.